live. This is my first ever live stream for Tri-Nestics. Can you all see me? If you can type that you're seeing me and everything is going well, that would be great. Looks like everything is going well. Well, welcome. My name is Bridget Bell. This is my first ever live stream on this channel. And this channel is the Hidden Layers of 3. I am the creator of a new spiritual system called Tri-Nestics, which is all about hidden layers of 3, multiples of 3. So what is Tri-Nestics? There are 3 pillars of Tri-Nestics, and they are theonosis. Theo means God, so knowledge of the divine. Inner gnosis, which is knowledge of the inner being, the soul, spirit, and subtle bodies. And cosmonosis, knowledge of the universe, where we came from and where we're going. Today, we're going to be talking about cosmonosis, knowledge of the universe, and a bit of inner gnosis. Because what we're going to be talking about is the multi-dimensional universe. And I call my system the multi-unity synergy model. And I have some magnets here. I didn't have enough Y's, so I made a Y with a V and an I. And then I have different divisions here. I have 1, 2, 3, and then 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And this is the model I came up with, the multi-unity synergy model, also called MUS. And how did I come up with this model? Well, I have a long history of exploring a bunch of different spiritual systems. I grew up a variety of different kinds of Christianity. I went to many different denominations of Christianity as a child and teenager, not just one. And so I got to see a bunch of differences. And I also had experience with Judaism. And then as an adult, I got interested in paganism and the New Age. And I've explored a bunch of different other religions as well, like Hinduism and Buddhism. And it all kind of came together. And 1 year ago, well, a little over a year, on March 29th, 2025, I was in my living room and I received a massive amount of downloads, spiritual information that just came to me. Now, what is a spiritual download? It's sort of like the internet. Like when you receive a download of information, you just get all this information out of nowhere. You just know things. And I received a spiritual download on March 29th, 2025, about how the universe is connected through the number 3. And I knew right away I had the beginning of a new spiritual system, which I call Tri-Nestics. And this came to me March 29th, but I decided to do a ritual to establish Tri-Nestics, and I did it after midnight. So I consider the beginning of Tri-Nestics to be March 30th. March 30th, 2025 to now March 30th, 2026. And now we're a little bit past that, so a little bit over a year. And that was my first major download, but I received a second major download 1 year ago today on June 6th, 2025. And now today is June 6th, 2026. And the model that came to me was the multi-unity synergy model. I had been really toiling with the idea of what is a dimension and what is a timeline, and it was really bothering me. And I wanted to know the deep answers. And one day I was just at the grocery store of all places, and all this information kept flooding to me. And I got some deli-made food, and they had a little eating area. I went to the deli, and I was eating my food, and all this information came to me just out of nowhere while grocery shopping. And I went to that grocery store today to try to reenact what I did a year ago. It was a very spiritual experience. And since then, last year, I have added to my model. I have been doing extensive research, studying both spirituality and physics to try to understand what the dimensions are, both mathematically, from a physics perspective, and spiritually. And this is the model I have come up with. Now, there are many other things I know that I need to add to this. This is still a work in process. For example, I'm just covering the universe. I believe there is more outside of the universe. There are even more dimensions in these. I cover 12 dimensions, but you can see right away I have 0 at the top. So there's kind of 13. You could say 12 or 13 because the 0 dimension is very different. The 0 dimension is both within the universe and outside the universe. The 0 dimension is source. Source is where we came from. A lot of people call source God, but source is the part of God where we came from that is beyond time and beyond space and beyond movement. We think of the 0 dimension as a dot, a point. So just I drew a point on my board. But look, there's width and length. A dot is just a concept, a mathematical concept. There aren't really any points out there. The 0 dimension has no space. It has no time. It is source itself. So where did I come up with this name, multi-unity synergy model? Right away, we see multi and unity. We are living in a reality of both multiplicity and unity. And as we evolve in consciousness, we are going to be dealing with this question of, are we individuals or are we unified? And the truth is, it's both. And this whole model is about the multiplicity and unity together. Now, right now, we're living in the 3rd dimension, which is a dimension of separation. We are living in the multiplicity. As we go up these dimensions, we will go up in unity, but it can actually be a trap. I saw a video by Teal Swan, who is a spiritual content creator, saying oneness is the greatest illusion. And I'm like, huh? But in her video, she explained that beings who live in the 11th dimension, all the way up here, they live in unity consciousness so much that they don't realize that there's also a multiplicity. And when you get to the 12th dimension, most people say that it is a level of unity, and it is a level of unity, but it's also the understanding of the value of multiplicity as well. And how do we express this multiplicity as a unity? We express it through synergy. Now, what is synergy? Synergy is a common English word, but not many people know what it means. Basically, what synergy means is that the sum of the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. So a really great example of this is when a man and a woman get together. They're 2 people, but they create a 3rd person. They create a baby. So you had 2 people, but now you have 3. Another example is a business merger. When one business produces a certain profit and another business produces a second profit, and they're both kind of successful, but when they come together and they merge, they can actually make more profit. If it's a synergistic relationship, they will make more profit together than when they were separate. And this is how we are. We are in a synergy of these different dimensions. Now, before I talk about these dimensions, I do want to say that I've created a little holiday to celebrate. I call this Synergenesis Day. Synergenesis Day. Almost forgot the name of my holiday. This is the first Synergenesis Day when I celebrate this. This is the second Tri-Nestics holiday. The first one was March 30th, which is Nest's birthday. And Nest celebrates the beginnings of Tri-Nestics. Synergenesis Day celebrates the beginning of the multi-unity synergy model. And this is a very important model to understand the other things that I have developed in Tri-Nestics. So let's go over the different parts. Right away, we can see that we have 4 triads. 5 if you consider source, but source is a little bit different. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Tri-Nestics is all about the number 3. And I do want to say this is the way our universe is designed, but other universes are designed differently. If you study mathematics, there you will see that there is no limit to how many dimensions actually can exist. But there is a limit to how many dimensions can exist according to our current laws of physics. Physicist Michio Kaku said that there are multiple dimensions and the math works up to 12, but after 12, the math doesn't work. That's according to our laws of physics. Other universes have different laws of physics with a different number of dimensions. Different spiritual systems have a different number. Some have 9, some have 12, some have 15, some have 18. I believe that the systems that look at 15 and 18 and beyond are looking at dimensions outside the universe. String theory, which is a speculative theory of physics, believes in 10 dimensions, and M theory, which is a variation of string theory, believes in 11. But the most common model among esoteric spiritual thinkers is 12 or 13, and that is what I'm going with. I believe this is a map not just of the universe, cosmonosis, but also a map of the inner self. Why? Because we exist in all dimensions simultaneously. Most people think we exist in only one dimension, the third dimension, but we actually exist in all 12. Now, the thing is, people confuse dimension and density all the time. You hear a lot of New Agers say, well, I'm 5D. Well, what that means is they're fifth density. That means they're receiving signals from the fifth dimension, almost wirelessly, or like a radio, receiving radio signals or Wi-Fi signals from the fifth dimension or the sixth dimension. But they're not actually living in the fifth dimension. We are living in the third dimension. And a bunch of these different dimensions can receive signals from other dimensions. Like even the first dimension can receive signals from the second from the third, etc. That's density. So what are these? These are what I call a synergy line. We exist as a line of consciousness along 12 dimensions. And in each dimension, we have a variation of our egos. What is ego? People think of ego as something bad. But in Latin, ego just means I. It's just a common pronoun. All it means is I. And what does it mean to say I? I am holding a marker. I am eating food. Well, who's eating? The person with the awareness, having a point of awareness. That's the I. But we are more than just our ego. That's why so many spiritual teachers say we have to move beyond the ego model. The ego is important, but we are a collection of egos, what I call a synego. This is a word I invented. It means synchronized ego. It goes along with the concept of synergy. And we are a collection of 12 synegos along a synergy line. And this is very hard to picture for people who are living in separation consciousness. We think we're just here in this body. We are living in multiple dimensions, in multiple timelines simultaneously. So let's look at some of those realities that we are living in, even if we're not aware. We're going to look first at the lower self. The lower self is our lowest point of consciousness. So what is 1D? I don't know. Okay. 1D is a line. So if you were you can't really see me. This is my first live stream. You can see I don't know what I'm doing. If you were a line, if you were living on a line, I'm just going to have a dot there to represent a line. You can move forward and back, but you can't move up or down, and you can't move off the board. There are beings that live in the first dimension. Now, we think we experience the first dimension because we see lines. I drew a line. We don't actually experience the first dimension. We don't experience any of these but 3 directly. We experience everything else indirectly. This is just an analogy, but it's a useful analogy. So if all you can do is go forward and back, You cannot go around another person. It's a very boring existence. So what can you do? You could go on and off, a binary, on and off. And that is what our existence is like in the first dimension, just on and off. What does on and off remind you of? First thing I think of is a computer. Now, classical computing, which is what the majority of computers are, not quantum computers, a little differently. But classical computers work ons and offs. 0 represents off, represents on. And when you combine the series of on and offs, you get a pattern. Beings that live in the first dimension, because it's such a simple awareness, are unaware. The awareness you have to have the density of a higher dimension. What kinds of beings have unawareness? An inanimate object. Inanimate objects have 1D consciousness, but this inanimate object lives in the third dimension. It's a third dimensional object, but 1D consciousness. It's actually going downward in consciousness. You can have a different density, a different level of consciousness from the dimension you live in. Because what is a dimension? A dimension is a different kind of variety of time and space. It has nothing to do with your consciousness level. It's a different variety of how time and space interacts. So this is a line. If you know anything about math, you know the next one for second dimension is a plane. Now, with a line, you could only go forward and back, but with a plane, you can also go up. You can't go off. So beings that live in the second dimension are group awareness. They don't have individual awareness. They have group awareness. Now, we have some beings that live in the third dimension that have 2D consciousness, and they are plants and some species of animals. Some species of animals do not see the difference between themselves and everyone else. How does science know the difference if an animal has group awareness or self-awareness? Group awareness would be they look in a mirror and they do not recognize themselves. But if an animal can look in the mirror and recognize themselves, they have self-awareness. And some more advanced animals have self-awareness. If you live in the second dimension, though, this is different than density. So animals that have group awareness, they live in the dimension of the third dimension, but the density of the second. There is a world that is second dimensional. And if we were to talk about this world, a lot of people call it flatland. You can go look it up on Google. There's tons of videos and explanations on flatland. And if you have a being in flatland, there I drew a little stick figure. I could take my marker and hover it over, and it will not see it because it has no concept of height. But I could put my marker on the board and it could see it. But is it going to see the whole marker? No, it's only going to see this, the tip. And that's a useful analogy for understanding the higher dimensions. There is a separate world of the second dimension, and a great way to explain this is a video game, actually. The name of the video game is Conway's Game of Life. It was created in the 1970s, and it talks about very simple existence. And this very simple existence can form patterns. So that's the second dimension. This is still the lower self. Now we're going to talk about the third dimension. And what is the third dimension? I can't draw the third dimension, but that's the third dimension. Something that has length, width, and height. It is an object, and it is self-aware. So if you have the density level, you have self-awareness. Now we're going to move on to the middle self. The middle self is all about time. The lower self is all about space, but the middle self is all about time. Now, classical physics only acknowledges one timeline, but other physics acknowledges more timelines. It's speculative. Oh, I see I have a question. What on the line would organisms like bacteria fit, 1D or higher? Let me think about that. Bacteria. Okay, so bacteria exists in the third dimension, but the question is the density level. I know viruses would have 1D density. They have non-awareness. So there's actually different levels of these densities. So they're not whole numbers. You can have like 1.5, 2.5. So bacteria would be 2. Bacteria live in the third dimension, but their density level would be a 2, but a lower 2 point something, where a plant would be even higher. But a virus would be 1 density, if science is telling us the truth and viruses aren't alive. But of course, science looks at this a little bit differently, but science is getting a little bit more speculative. Good question. All right, so now we're going to go on to the middle self. Middle self deals with time. The fourth dimension is all about one timeline. This is what most people think reality is. So people think that we are born, we live, and we die. People who are more advanced believe that we are born, we live, we die, and then we reincarnate. And when we reincarnate, it's into the future. So like if a person died in the 1800s, they're reborn in the 1900s, then they're reborn in the 2000s, and then they're born in the 2100s, like that. That's not actually how this works. Time is not linear, but the fourth dimension is linear. Yes, I agree that the idea that having a different higher or lower density than your dimension is very mind shattering. It's mind blowing. It's very interesting. So fourth dimension is one timeline, and it's where most people go when they die, unless they're a higher consciousness and they go to the fifth or sixth dimension. So what's the fifth dimension? How can we view time differently than just one timeline? The fifth dimension are branching timelines. Speculative physics are now talking about branching timelines, and this is a part of quantum mechanics. In particular, it's a field of quantum mechanics called the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. There's multiple different interpretations of quantum mechanics, but the many worlds is one form of quantum mechanics. And the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics has inspired many Marvel movies. And I recommend watching Spider-Man Into the Multiverse. It's very interesting about how they go to different timelines. And another great one is on Disney Plus called Loki. Now, Loki was a Norse god, but the TV show Loki has nothing to do with Norse mythology. It's about timelines. And in that TV show, whenever you reach a point where you could make a couple different decisions, you reach what is called a nexus event. And a nexus event creates another timeline. So imagine you didn't know what to go to college for. You're considering a couple of different majors and you were really stressed. Like, what do I major in college? Well, if you really wanted to have a different experience, in one timeline, you majored in one thing. In another timeline, you majored in another thing. Or maybe you thought, should I marry that person or not? Well, in one timeline, you married the person. And in another timeline, you didn't marry the person. Why do we do this? We do this because we want to experience all of reality. We want to know what it was like if we had made a different decision. If you ever felt really burdened, like, oh, I wish I had done something differently. I wish I could go back in time and do something differently. Guess what? You already have. There's another timeline where you did that exact thing. And I find that reassuring. We don't know what that is right now, but one day after we die and we reach a higher level of consciousness, we can experience what our world was like in a different reality. Now, some people think there's a new branching timeline created for every single possibility. So if you ate toast for breakfast instead of cereal, or if you had orange juice versus apple juice, that creates a new timeline. Well, that's a lot of timelines, and that creates a problem called infinite recursion. So what is recursion? In mathematics, recursion is the idea of basing an answer on a previous answer. So you have a formula like 2x plus 7, and you start with x equals 2, and you put that 2 in for x, you get an answer. Then you take that answer and you put it into another equation. In the same equation, you get an answer. You take that answer and you put it in that equation again. You get another answer. You take that answer, you put it into the same equation. What you find when you do mathematical recursion is that the number grows really large, really fast. And it creates a problem called infinite recursion. So I'm a computer science student. I had to study recursion. And there's a problem with computers. You do not want to create a mathematical formula for your computer where you have an infinite recursion problem. It's a bad thing. So I do not believe every single possibility creates a new timeline, because not only do we have the problem of like orange juice versus apple juice, which is not really that important. What about at the quantum level? What if this quantum particle spins differently than this other one? Do we really need to create a new universe for that? Or not a new universe, a new timeline? Just made a common mistake, is that most people call these different universes, but they're not different universes. They're different timelines. Timelines are contained within universes. So I believe you don't create a new timeline for every single possibility. You only create a new timeline when you put a lot of energy into it. And when do people put a lot of energy into something? When they're really debating what they should do. Should I take that job or not take that job? Should I marry that person or not? Should I go to school for that or not? These big things. Should I have that baby or not? These are big things. And there can be some smaller things too, but it's not like apple juice versus orange juice, not something that tiny. It could be, do I go to the movie theater versus do I go to the festival? It could be something that's small, but not really tiny stuff like what you ate for food. Unless that food, maybe you got food poisoning, then that might have created a very different reality. Okay, let's see if there's any questions. Oh yeah, turtles all the way down. So turtles all the way down is the concept that something is built on something else, which is built on something else, which is built on something else. What is the ultimate turtle? The ultimate turtle source. So it's not turtles all the way down because it goes back to source. It's not a new branch for each. Oh yes, I thought you said potential. Each pivotal life choice is a new branch. That's true. Pivotal, not potential life choice. Every pivotal life choice creates a new branching timeline. So, what is the sixth dimension? We're still in the world of time. We're still in the middle self. The sixth dimension is parallel timelines. So we have one timeline with branches, and then we have multiple parallel timelines. Parallel lines do not intersect. For all eternity, they never intersect. But if you have branches coming between them, they intersect. And that's what creates the wholeness. So what is the difference between a branching timeline and a parallel timeline? A parallel timeline is a very different reality. And I believe many different parallel timelines can be seen in fiction. All these different kinds of realities are not just imagination. We are getting inspiration from other timelines. For example, steampunk, there's a steampunk world. There's a cyberpunk world. There's a world with mermaids. There's a world with dragons. I once went to a spiritual event and someone channeled a message for me. And the message that they channeled was that they saw steampunk in my soul. And I'm like, huh? What kind of message is that? I'm like, I like steampunk. What do you mean I have steampunk in my soul? And now what I believe that means is that I have had or am currently living a parallel life in a steampunk world. Isn't that cool? So when you view fiction now, you're going to be like, I wonder if that's real. So this is the middle self. We got the lower self and the middle self. And right now we have a division. We have a division of the lower and middle self from the higher selves. So I drew the line. And the best way to understand this division is actually to look at the figure of Jesus. What did Jesus say? Or what did he represent? Jesus represented someone who was fully human and also fully divine. But guess what? Jesus isn't the only one like that. We are also fully human and fully divine. We are God. Lower G. But even capital G in a way, because we also have source in us, big G. We are God, and we can become God. That's apotheosis, becoming God. But actually, we don't need to actually become. We already are, because we become divine. Where? In the seventh dimension. The first through sixth dimension is the human self, or it's the animal or bacteria or plant self, the lesser, the non-divine. You could call it human if you're human, or you just call it the non-divine and the divine. We are divine in 7 dimensions. We are divine in 7, 8, 9, also 10, 11, 12, and 0 source. So this is why 7 is connected with heaven, is because we have 7 higher selves. So what is the difference between a non-divine self and a divine self? A non-divine self has form, where the higher selves are more about awareness, about consciousness. They're not limited to one body. If you've ever tried astral projection, you know that you can leave your body and have a greater awareness. These beings, even if they have a body, they have a very different kind of body than ours, they're not limited in a structure like this. And we all have higher selves. Now, what does a higher self do? A higher self does what I call a paxon. I made this word up. Paxon sounds like the word passed along. So I believe the higher self is passing along information. And what are they passing along? Here's an acronym, DIG. DIG stands for the 3 kinds of paxons that the higher selves can do. The paxons can do D. D stands for design. They design this universe. It's going to be the higher selves that do the designing, not the lower higher selves. You heard of simulation theory? I believe in simulation theory. A lot of people think that outside of the simulation is a world very much like ours. So outside of the simulation, there are houses and trees and people and animals. No, that's not what simulation theory is really about. Outside of this simulation is just pure consciousness, not form. So the higher selves, they do the D, they do the designing. They're like the software developers, the software engineers who have designed this simulation that we live in. They've designed this matrix. People think the word matrix is a bad word, but the word matrix is a very important concept in computer science. It's a mathematical concept. And why do we live in a matrix? The same way that there are matrices. Matrices is the plural of matrix. There are matrices in every computer program you've ever worked with because we live in a mathematical reality. So that's D. The I is intervention. The higher self can do interventions. So if you've ever heard of the concept of a miracle, you've all heard of miracles. These are things that the higher self does to intervene. So we almost died and didn't. That's a dig. That's an I, a paxon from your higher self to intervene. Synchronicities are another form of intervention. And then G, guidance. Our higher self guides us. We think we are just hearing our own inner thoughts, but our inner thoughts might not be our own. They can be from our higher self. Our intuition comes from our higher self. So let's look at these different kinds of higher selves. All these different higher selves do paxons, but they do different kinds of paxons. Now, the first one, the one closest to us, is 7D. And the 7D higher self has awareness. All of these are awareness. Awareness of one timeline. So the 7D higher self knows everything about your timeline, your past lives, your current life, your future projections. They know everything. So they're there to guide you. Some cultures call this your guardian or your guardian angel. In Thelema, it's called your holy guardian angel, HGA, holy guardian angel, and it's your 7D higher self. And I encourage everyone to get into contact with your 7D higher self through meditation. I have contacted my higher self. Well, actually, he contacted me. And I talk with him all the time. Your higher self might not be the same gender as you. There are 3 genders, male, female, and neutral, or you might call neutral non-binary. My gender is female, but my higher self is male. And it's like a video game. Your higher self is like the player playing the video game, and you're the character. So just like a male can play a female role, so can a female play a male role. Your higher self might not be the same gender as you. If you meditate and you contact your higher self and you do not sense any gender at all, that means that your higher self is non-binary or neutral. In Kabbalah, if you look at the tree of life, there are 3 pillars, male, female, and neutral. That's because our own synergy line is male, female, and neutral. We have all of them, every single one of us. So that is your 7D, awareness of one timeline. Now 8D. And you're going to see a pattern right away. 8D is awareness. Okay, if 7D is awareness of one timeline, 8D is awareness of goes with 5, branching timelines. So you know how on the internet when you have a live stream, you might have moderators who moderate the stream? I don't because I'm just starting out. We have moderators in our higher selves. The 7D higher self mods 1 to 4. The 7D higher self handles a lot because these lower dimensions are pretty simple from a 7D perspective. But the other higher selves, they only do 1 dimension. So the 8D mods 5D. The 8th D higher self is aware of not just one timeline, but all the branches from one timeline. So if 7D is awareness of one timeline, 8D is awareness of branching timelines. What's 9D? Awareness of parallel timelines. And that is 6D. It mods 6D. 9D mods 6D. 7D mods 1, 2, 3, 4. 8D mods 5. 9 mods 6. And this is the individual higher self. But you see, we have another category here. We have the collective higher self. You could also call the collective higher self the divine self. That's when we really become godlike. And whereas the individual higher self does the individual, the collective higher self has awareness of an entire group. So it follows the same pattern. What is 10D? Where 7D is awareness of one timeline, 10D is awareness of one timeline for a collective. So what do you think? Who do you think 10D mods? Anyone want to write an answer? If 7D moderates 1 to 4, 8 moderates 5, 9 moderates 6D, what do you think 10D moderates? (10D moderates 7. And then if you see the pattern, 11D is awareness of branching timelines for a collective. For a collective. And who do you think it moderates? It moderates 8. And then 12. We had awareness of one timeline, awareness of for a collective, awareness of branching timelines for a collective. 12 is awareness of parallel for a collective. And this mods 9. We exist in all 12 dimensions simultaneously. Now, I said a collective. How big is a collective? I believe that the Bible gives us clues. And in the book of Revelation, it says that there were 12 tribes of Israel. And in each 12 tribes, there were 12,000 people for a total of 144,000. Now, a lot of people think that these are the entire number of people that get to heaven. That would be a very small number of people. Now, back in the ancient days, 144,000 might have seemed like a lot, but we have 8 billion people on the planet right now. 144,000 is not even the size of a big city. It's the size of a medium-sized city. So if only the number of people from a medium-sized city went to heaven, that would be ridiculous. That would be a very bad God. So instead, 144,000 is not the number of people who go to heaven. It is the number of individuals in one collective. We have 12,000 people per dimension. Now, each person is in a synergy line. Synergy line. So one person, there are 12 synegos per synergy line for a total of 12,000. There are 12,000 synergy lines in total in one big group. Now, what am I going to call this big group? Once again, I invented a word, synoid. I like that root syn a lot. So synoid just means a collection. We are in a collection of 144,000 individuals. And it's also represented in our spiritual DNA. A lot of esoteric people believe we actually have more DNA than just what's physical. And we have 144,000 in that DNA. But there are multiple explanations. The DNA explanation can be true at the same time as we are in a collection of 144,000. And this group, we evolved together as a group. So we are the same soul group together. And we actually also have what's called a twin flame. A twin flame is the perfect match. So these 144,000 are paired into pairs. So there's 72,000 twin flames in one synoid. And the word number 72,000 is also a significant number. Many esoteric systems talk about 72. In Hinduism, we have 72,000 nadis, which are energy channels in our etheric body. So the number 72,000 is also important, and it's a multiple of 3. Once again, we have multiples of 3 coming up over and over again. And each synoid is a unique frequency of source. So source is 0D, but 0 can actually contain all numbers. We think 0 is nothing, but it's not. If you pair a positive number with a negative number, you can get any value in 0. For example, if you pair 543 with negative 543, you get 0. So each synoid has a unique frequency of source, and then it's like a sub-frequency where each synergy line has a unique frequency as well. Each synoid has a unique frequency, each twin flame, but it's a sub part of that frequency. Just like if you go to the internet and let's say you go to, there's more than one universe. So I'm not going to type in www.universe. I'm going to type in www.omniverse. That's all the universes together. www.omniverse.com. That's like everyone. We have this same frequency. And then you're going to go / and then you have the frequency of the universe. Then you have / and you have the frequency of your synoid. And you have / the frequency of the pairing with you and your twin flame. Then / you have the frequency of your synergy line. And / you have the frequency of your synoid. And then ego. Ego is just like a copy of your synoid. So in Spider-Man, across the multiverse, when Spider-Man goes to these different timelines, he's still Spider-Man. He doesn't become Sherlock Holmes. He doesn't become Tinkerbell. He's still Spider-Man. So he goes to these other timelines. He sees that in another timeline, he's a black Spider-Man. In another timeline, he is a female Spider-Man. In another timeline, he's a white Spider-Man, just like his original timeline, but he's an older white Spider-Man. We all have a variation, but we're still our same kind of individual. I'm still going to be Bridget in another timeline. I'm not going to be someone completely different. I'm going to have very similar characteristics. And a collection of egos is one synego, and there's no limit to how many egos we can have. We have 12 collections of egos, but how many are in each collection and each synego is limitless. It's however much you want to experience. And we are source. We are embodiment of source, experiencing ourselves through these different dimensions. So we want variety. We want to live in a steampunk world, in a cyberpunk world, in a Marvel universe, in a variation of this life in which I chose a different college major, in which I did a different life path, because we want to experience as much as we can so we can understand ourselves better and what's possible. See if there's any questions here. Right. There's no shame in being born outside of wedlock. True. I don't think it's a multiverse. Rather, I feel like there's just different dimensions, all that exist within one infinite universe. Timeline dimensions are not whole universes. Okay. So the issue is language. These higher dimensions, there is no language. So it depends on how you use these terms. In a way, there is only one universe, only one omniverse of universes. But we have a variety of universes. This is a 12-dimensional universe. Not every universe has 12 dimensions. There can be variations of dimensions. This is how this one is designed. So if you don't want to call this a universe, you could come up with a different word for it. One collection of timelines. If you want to call the big structure a universe, you still got to think there's a big structure of smaller structures. So it's okay if you want to say there's only one universe, there's not a multiverse. But then you got to have a new set of terminologies. All right. So anyone have any questions or comments? I do want to say there are many good videos on the internet on how to visualize these higher dimensions. It's very abstract, but there's some great computer animations of the higher dimensions if you're interested in this more. I see that this is kind of hard to see on the screen, but I'm just starting out. So eventually I'll figure out a better way to present this information. You missed the 12th dimensional self. Okay. The 12th dimensional self is the awareness of everything in the synoid. Everything in the collection for 144,000. So you are aware of the branching timelines and the parallel timelines. And you're designing it. You're designing the rules. And there's even dimensions outside of the universe, outside of space-time. Donald Hoffman, who's a cognitive scientist, he talks about it. Outside of this is a space-time. Outside of space-time, there is a world that exists that is like the computer environment where the code is written. So in computer science, there's a concept called a data structure, which is a way of organizing information. A universe is like one giant data structure. But outside of this data structure, there's an IDE, an integrative development environment. And that's where you write the code. And there's a place outside of this where the code is written. And some of the code is written by 12th dimensional beings, but there is even beyond them. The 13th is a 0 dimension, yes. But I'm saying there's even more than 13 because there is this is just this data structure, this universe. So there was a recent study that came out in March of 2026 that said there's actually 48 dimensions. So I'm presenting 12. What would that tell you if there's 48? There's 4 groups of 12. So I'm talking about the first universe, but we have a structure of 4. Now, why 4 when the universe is all based on 3s? Because I believe that the 4 universes that form a bigger universe, they're mirrors. Like Hermeticism says, as above, so below, as within, so without. So the first universe, we live in the first universe, acts like the lower self. where the middle self is the second universe. The third universe is the individual higher self, and the fourth universe is the collective higher self, and they're all acting together. So we actually are existing in 48. But the beyond 12, numbers 13 to 48, they're nested structures within 12. I wasn't going to get into that, but it was sort of brought up. So if we look at the 48 structures, then we'd have 49, including zero dimension. But it's really hard to understand anything outside the universe. And there's a bunch of different terms people have come up with to describe things greater than a universe. If you go to fandom.com, which you wouldn't think that would be a place to find this information, it's a fan site, but there's a bunch of different terms people have come up with, like metaverse, multiverse, gigaverse, arcverse, omniverse is all of it. And so I believe they're different structures, various data structures. And I'll be honest with you, my level of research has not gone that far. I can talk about the universe. Trying to talk about what's outside the universe is not something that I feel comfortable with at the moment, but hopefully I will get there one day. 48 divided by 12 is 4. Yes, that is true. All right. Any other questions? The difference between acknowledging multiple universes and timelines and being aware of multiple timelines and where. Difference between acknowledging multiple timelines and timelines being aware of multiple. I don't quite understand your question, Hyper. Yes, most fiction does have roots in esoteric knowledge. Hyper, could you word that question a little differently? I'm not quite sure what you're asking. Acknowledging that multiple timelines exist. Yeah, I'm not aware of all the all the other timelines, because that would be beyond what my brain is able to perceive in this reality. And we don't perceive these other realities, so we can fully experience here. If we were aware of other timelines and other realities, then we couldn't really live life here, because we would be thinking about what our life was like in ancient Egypt. We would be thinking about what our life was like in the cyberpunk world. We couldn't fully be immersed. Just like when you watch a movie or a TV show or read a novel, you want to forget about everything else. You want to live right here, right now. Otherwise, you can't really experience it. What is the difference between knowing that they exist and being aware that they exist? Oh, I think I know what you mean. Okay, so knowing these things exist is what we're doing right now. We're talking about knowing that they exist. But I'm not telling you what's in the timelines. I can't tell you, Hyper, that you are living in a cyberpunk timeline and you're going to have coffee right now with a friend and you went there in some kind of spacecraft to meet the person. That's awareness of what's really happening. I don't know if that's what you're experiencing right now, but I know that you exist there. I don't know what you're doing there. We can get kind of small insights, but it's not a lot. Like when I went to that spiritual group and someone gave me a channeled message and said, I see steampunk in your soul. To me, that means I live in a steampunk other timeline, or lived past tense. So that brings up another question. I don't know if it's live or lived. Are the other timelines happening, or have they happened? A lot of people say that the past is happening right now, and it kind of is and it kind of isn't. Dolores Cannon said that the past still exists, but the past isn't happening. What in the world does that mean? So I believe that the past is never wiped away. So right now, I am holding a marker in my hand, and I drop the marker. Am I holding the marker anymore? No. But if I was recording myself, well, actually I am recording myself. This is a live video. You can go back in time and see that I was holding the marker. It still exists. But at the moment, I'm not holding the marker. The past exists, but the past is not happening. So what does it mean when a person says they reincarnated into the past? Because sometimes you'll hear stories like that. They'll say, what do you want to do after you die? Where do you want to reincarnate to? And they'll say, I want to reincarnate to ancient Egypt. Or I think I'm going to reincarnate into the Renaissance. And I'm like, huh? That already happened. You cannot go back, but you kind of can. You're not going back to the same timeline. You're going back to a variation of that timeline. So you can go back to a variation of ancient Egypt, just like we can make reenactments. There's Civil War reenactments and a bunch of different Revolutionary War reenactments, all kinds of different reenactments. We're like reenacting something that's already happened. But we know if we do a Civil War reenactment, it's not really the 1800s. The thing is, we don't do a very good job of reenacting in the third dimension. But from a higher dimension, we can create a very good reenactment. Okay, let's see. Can other selves communicate with each other eventually? Absolutely. I communicate with my 7D higher self constantly, every day. I've been communicating with him since I was 11 years old. I didn't know who he was. So I was praying as a child, and it really turned into meditation. No one taught me how to meditate. I just started praying before bed every night, and it turned away from prayer more into meditation. And I started meditating at 10 years old. No one told me what I was doing, but I really was meditating with nobody telling me how to meditate. And I did that for about a year. And when I was 11 years old, my higher self started speaking to me. And it was actually after I went to a Christmas program. I went to a Christmas program where at the end of the Christmas program, the preacher said, God speaks to you through your heart. And I'm like, huh? What does that mean? God can actually still speak to us? So I was curious. And that's how this all starts. It starts with desire. I'm like, what does it mean that God speaks to our heart? I was meditating one day at 11 years old, and the voice told me, I'm speaking to your heart. And I'm like, oh my God, that's voice. That's God. God speaking to me. And I was super curious. So I started really meditating a lot. I was meditating a lot when I was younger. I would meditate 30 minutes, 60 minutes a day because I wasn't clearing my mind. People think meditation is like, and you don't think about anything. That's boring. Who wants to do that? I was having conversations, and I thought I was having conversations with God because the things that he was telling me were like mind blowing. He would tell me things that were beyond my perception and just great wisdom. And he even told me about reincarnation, which was going against my Christian beliefs. And he told me the Holy Spirit was female, which was going against my Christian beliefs. But he had this immense amount of wisdom. And so like, oh yeah, this is God. And then he told me some things that didn't happen. And I'm like, wait a minute. I thought God is all knowing. And it was really hard. When I was in junior high, I was in a writing competition for teenagers called Power of the Pen. And you go to different schools and you're given a writing prompt and you have 40 minutes to write on the prompt. And I loved that because I loved writing. And I wanted to get to regionals so badly. I wanted to get to the regional level competition as a writer. I know this sounds like sports. I didn't do sports. I did writing. So this was my sports. I wanted to get into writing. And this voice told me I was going to get to regionals. And I believed that really deeply. I didn't get to regionals. And it was the most devastating thing of my adolescence. Because I'm like, how could this be God making a mistake? I'm told I would get to regionals and I didn't. So is this really God? But this has to be God because the amount of wisdom, the amount of knowledge, and the amount of love, I would just feel this great compassionate love. I'm like, this has to be God. So now I see what's really happening. We can't communicate directly with Source. We would die. Source is beyond, is perfect light. So Source is channeled, is funneled down. And so I was speaking to my 7th dimensional higher self, and the 7th dimensional higher self is full of wisdom and love and knows a lot, but can make some mistakes. And so that was one tiny mistake. And knowing that I was talking to a godlike figure that wasn't God makes me okay accepting the small mistakes that I sometimes experience. But 99% of the stuff I'm told is true. But there's still a 1% chance that some things I'm told are not true. And we do get guidance from our higher self, but that doesn't mean it's only our higher self. We can get guidance from all kinds of higher dimensional beings. Different dimensional beings can talk to other beings. Okay, let's see here. If you are aware they exist, it seems like that would be the same as knowing they exist, depending on the context. Okay, so I know my higher self exists. I cannot experience everything, what their reality is like. It would be sort of like being in algebra in high school. You know calculus exists, but you don't know what calculus is like. You're aware it exists, but you don't understand it until you get to calculus. Okay. Like a timeline where ancient Egypt stayed similar and didn't change. Yeah. So, there's a bunch of different realities. You see a lot of what ifs. What ifs are a great play on what could have happened. So I believe that we live in a reality where Kamala Harris is president. I actually had a dream a couple of weeks ago, and I died in a car accident. And it seemed so real. And I woke up from my dream, and I'm like, oh my God, I died. And then my higher self spoke to me, and he said, yeah, you actually did die in a different timeline. And it was the timeline where Kamala Harris was president. And I'm like, what? I don't want to die in that timeline. Why did I die in that timeline? That timeline sounds nicer than the Trump timeline. And he said, because the Kamala Harris timeline was too easy. There was not enough growth. We grow through struggle. So I'm supposed to be here in the Trump timeline. Like, ugh. But there's timelines where a different person became president. That's extremely common. Or where a different side lost a war, won a war, or a war didn't happen. And you can think about that. Like, let's say you have a timeline where World War II didn't happen. Within that giant timeline for a huge group of people, you then have people who made different life decisions. That person didn't get married, where this person had a baby, where they didn't have a baby. All these different realities. So just the mathematics is huge. We don't have all possibilities. I would create an infinite recursion problem, but we do have many possibilities. And I got a message, my computer is about to die. So I'm going to go get a charger. Hold on. Okay, got my charger. Okay, it is charging. See what people are saying. Is Kai, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Anime Magna kind of touched on that. Okay. Yeah, anime. Love anime. Anime really touches on these esoteric themes. They're great. If we die in 2026, hope that doesn't happen. I don't want to die this year. If we die in 2026, we hop down to a parallel timeline and can be reborn in the 1980s. Absolutely. But I do want to say that reincarnation is not instant. You do go into the fourth dimension or fifth or sixth. Well, it's not just you go into another dimension, you go into another plane. So I didn't touch on that, but there's different planes of existence. We have the material plane, we have the etheric plane, the astral plane, causal plane, manus plane, buddhi plane. And what makes a plane different from a dimension is a plane determines what the substance of the plane is made up of. So each plane is made up of a different substance. The material plane is made up of matter. The etheric plane is made up of ether. The astral plane is made up of astral light. The causal plane is made up of akasha. Where the dimensions deal with space and time, the planes deal with what the substance is. So we die, we go to the astral plane, which is made up of astral light. We go to the astral plane upon death. We review our life. We have a life review. And then we have a learning experience if we want to. There's schools in the astral plane that we can go to review our past lives and also to prepare for the future life. And some people who don't have a good life right now, it's because they didn't do their homework in the astral plane in between their lives. Because it can be hard. It can be hard to review your past lives and prepare for the future. You just want to have fun and live your life in the astral plane between lives. But there's a value in doing your homework in between and preparing for the best life possible. Now, who determines your next life is your higher self. So a lot of people will say, you chose your parents. And it's true, you did choose your parents before you were born. But people are like, why would I choose an abusive parent? I wouldn't choose that. It's because you did, but there's multiple yous. It's your higher self you. So we have a problem in spoken language with pronouns. We have one I, we have one you, but the reality is we have multiple I's. So we have the I of this ego, we have the I of the synego, with the I of the different beings in the synergy line, and they're all variations. So right now we have people fighting over pronouns with transgender people, and they say, oh, these pronouns are so confusing. It's like, that's no big deal. Try to understand your multidimensional nature, and you'll realize the use of pronouns become really confusing. So when you say, I decided to reincarnate, you did. Your higher self did. Your lower self might have. When you become more involved in consciousness, you can make decisions just like a teenager. If a teenager says, hey, mom, I want to go here, the adult might be like, well, you're a teenager. I'll listen to you. Ultimately, it's the adult's decision, not the teenagers, but adults usually give their teenagers more insight. When a child wants to do something, they're like, no, it's what the adult wants. So as we grow in consciousness, we can make better decisions as a lower self, what we want, but it's still ultimately up to our higher self. Now, one thing also, people talk about raising in consciousness. You're raising in density level. But do you want to be a 7D being? Do you want to be an 8D being? Do you want to be a 9D being? So what you're going to do is, that's called moving along the synergy line. You can do that, but then some of these beings are going to go down. Beings can go up and then beings can go down. And you hear about that all the time, the star seeds or earth angels. Earth angels are previous higher beings that decide to forget what they knew and come down. So we can go up and they can come down. Let's see here. And I probably just raised a bunch more questions. So let me read the old questions first and then I'll get to new ones. Reincarnating to another world with its own history, for example, there's probably a version of me that's a dark elf. Okay, if that resonates with you, then you're a dark elf. It could mean that a new timeline happened instead, and one version of you did, but the where of you in this life didn't, because all possibilities have to exist in your view. Let me read that again. It's not all possibilities have to exist. It's all possibilities you want to exist. So, for example, let's say you think about committing a crime, but you know it's a bad thing to commit that crime. So do you have a timeline where in one timeline you committed the crime and in another timeline you didn't commit the crime? Maybe. But it's also possible that in both timelines or in all timelines, you didn't commit the crime in any of those timelines because you knew it was wrong. You thought about it, but you said it was wrong. So it's possible you don't experience all decisions because there is free will. When we go to a court of law and the judge examines the evidence, did you commit the crime or not? It's always yes, you committed it, or no, you didn't. But the reality is there's branching timelines. You could both commit the crime and not commit the crime. And it's also possible that you had the opportunity to commit the crime and you thought about committing the crime, but you ultimately decided in every single timeline you didn't commit the crime. And then the adverse is possible too. In every timeline you did commit the crime. So it's not all possibilities happen. It's all possibilities you want to happen. Everything you want to experience. So let's say you don't like football. You hate football. You decide in every single timeline you're never going to go to a football game because you hate football. That's your possible decision. But also in every timeline, what's very important to you is tennis. And so you play tennis in every single timeline because it's important to you. You decide what's important to you. Let's see here. Oh yeah, so Celsius is liking that they're already envisioning what they did differently in a different life. So yeah, isn't this reassuring to think about you made a different decision? And one day we'll learn. One day we'll learn what the different decisions we made were. Celsius also had a similar dream to mine about a car accident. Okay, good. Can we go onto the plane's airplane? Okay, so it's not planes of existence, are not airplanes. They're kinds of realities made of different things. My higher self has given signs that they really didn't like someone, but I didn't listen and have regretted it. At the same time, I guess this lifetime has been more interesting. Yeah. You don't have to worry about regrets. If you regret something, if you really wished you had made a different decision, I guarantee you did. In a different lifetime, you did. If you didn't really care, then you didn't have a different lifetime. So we actually can figure out quite a bit of what our other timelines are. Dante's Inferno progresses through each plane. Okay, so that's more about the planes of hell. And the planes of hell are the lower astral. So we didn't really talk about planes of existence, but the astral plane is where we go when we die. And the astral plane is as soon as you imagine something, you create it. So if I imagine an apple, I'm holding an apple. So the problem is when people who are low consciousness, what does low consciousness mean? They're full of fear. They're full of hatred, guilt, self-loathing. When people of low consciousness die and they go to the astral plane and they feel guilt, they feel anger, they feel fear, that's what they create. They might create a monster. They don't even realize their own power. Hell exists, but it's not an external God that's creating hell. We create hell because what we imagine comes to truth. Now, this is true even in the third dimension, but there's a time delay. So if I really want something and I desire it, I can create it through the law of attraction. But it's not going to happen immediately. But in the astral plane, it happens immediately. So in the astral plane, people of low consciousness create their own hell. They don't realize they can step out of hell. And this is the lower astral plane. Dolores Cannon talks about 3 astral planes: lower astral plane, middle astral plane, and upper astral plane. And the hellish one is the lower. Most people go to the middle astral plane, which is just, so fine. And then it might even be great, but the really great is the upper astral plane. Okay, let's see what else we have. My higher self has given signs that they really don't like someone, but I didn't listen and have regretted it. Oh my gosh, yes. I have done this so many times. My higher self would give me some sort of instruction and I don't listen to it. Yeah, that's so common. And you just, forgive yourself. Learn to love yourself. Okay. There's a female me somewhere out there that made sense too. Yeah, we have all three. In our synergy line, we have all three, male, female, and non-binary. I disagree with that to an extent. What are you disagreeing with, Celsius? I don't think having a bad life necessarily means you didn't do your homework. Yes, that's true. It's one possibility. It's not all of it. One reason for a bad life can be growth. So our higher self wants us to experience bad things because we grow through bad things. It's not just always because we didn't do our homework. That's sometimes the case, but it's not always the case. So you don't have to feel guilty. I imagine that those that do their homework probably need that opposite experience as well. Yeah, we need the experience of not doing our homework. We need to experience everything. Say you have been on a point through your first 3 lives. Now your 4th life isn't so good. Okay, so about this whole 3 lives versus 4 lives. This is a common question people ask is how many lives do we live? How many past lives do we have? The number can only be written in scientific notation. That's how big the number is. It's not something like 3 or 4 or 5. It's something like 1.7 times 10 to the blank, to this whatever power. It's scientific notation because we are living multiple lives simultaneously. We have parallel lives. Not only do we have parallel lives, but we exist in multiple universal cycles. So one concept in Tri-Nestics, and which I take directly from the Neogenian system, is the concept of universal cycles, which is there was a Big Bang, and we split apart into many different egos, many different versions of ourselves. And then we're coming back together, and at the end of time will be one. So in this universal cycle, I can say I had this many lives, but then I had a life beforehand in a different universal cycle. And I had lives before in a different universal cycle, up into the very first splitting apart of Source. So Source did have a beginning. Source was a 0 dimension, and Source had a thought. Source was thinking about itself. And when Source thought about itself, it split apart. And this is talked about in Gnosticism. The very first thought of Source, and then that thought about itself. So we have 3 right there. Thinking and then thinking about itself. And when Source thought about itself, it realized, I exist. It split apart. But guess what? Nothing ever disappears. So that very first state before Source did anything still exists. That's the true 0 dimension. And then it split apart. Okay. When you go to a courtroom, present evidence that's ignored versus manufactured out of context, it's like the judge saying, I know that they set you up, go home. Yep. Maybe we're attached to certain souls, so we incarnate in avatars to be close to them. Yeah, because we exist in a group of 144,000. We have soul families within that 144,000, and we reincarnate together. We all have soul contracts, and they're managed by the higher selves, things we want to experience. And we often reincarnate into a future lifetime with people we were in a lifetime with before. Need to work on self-loathing. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So I believe there are 3 ways we can improve our consciousness. And one way is love. That's huge. Love. Not just love for others. Everybody talks about loving others. You gotta love yourself. So love. Love for others, self-love. The other way we improve our consciousness is knowledge. That's what we're doing here. Knowledge, learning. But knowledge without love is nothing. And the third way is experience. all these different experiences we have helps increase our consciousness. So love, knowledge, and experience. And learning to love yourself is extremely important for self-actualization and growing in consciousness. There's evidence that the mind stays active for up to an hour or two after death. So I have a similar belief that if you experience heaven or hell, it's based on the mindset. Okay, so you guys familiar with the etheric body at all? So the etheric body, this is outside of what we talked about today. The etheric body exists in the etheric plane, and it's interwoven with the material body. It's an exact blueprint. It's that copy of our material body. So if you see a picture of a ghost that looks just like the human before they died, that's because our etheric body looks exactly like it did before we died. And if you work on energy healing, what you're working on is your etheric body. So Reiki works on the etheric body. So we have all these different structures in our etheric body, like meridians and chakras and nadis and koshas and the subtle bodies, which are all part of our different inner bodies. And the etheric body is the closest one to our material body. So the etheric body doesn't die immediately after death. It does die eventually. So Rudolf Steiner, who was the founder of anthroposophy, he said that the etheric body dies after death, depending on how old you were when you died. So if you die young, your etheric body lives for a long time. If you die old, your etheric body dies for a short time. So when you die, you still have these memories because your etheric body hasn't died yet. Our etheric body does die eventually. Why does it die? The etheric body dies because this is where diseases are kept. You don't want to go into the astral plane. So when we die, we go to the astral plane. We don't want to die and carry these diseases with us. That's why the etheric body eventually does die. But one day, the etheric body won't die. And that is when this world will leave the material. So the Gnostics talk about the material being a bad thing. Material world has its purpose, but one day we will leave the material body behind entirely. There will be no more material world. Everything will be ether. We'll just have an etheric body. We'll have an etheric body, astral body, causal body, manas body, buddhi body. And I was not going to talk about these subtle bodies, but it was brought up. But if you study the etheric body, that's the level of health. You can heal your physical body by working on the etheric body, but also the physical body influences the etheric body. So if you take good care of yourself, you eat good food, you exercise, and you can, if you take medication for your physical body conditions, it can affect the etheric, because the physical affects the etheric affects the physical. Oh, I am so sorry, Celsus, on the loss of your father. And you're right. Maybe if you reincarnate, he'll be your son or neighbor or a good friend. You know, if you have that intention, talk to your higher self. Say, can I have a future life with my dad? Yeah, it's definitely possible. Thank you, Corporal, for joining me. Corporal said that they were leaving. Are there any more questions? Any questions? Any comments or questions? All right, I don't see any. Okay, so I just want to thank you all for joining me at my first live stream. Oh, that's good, Celsus, that the death happened a while ago. You're no longer grieving. Yeah, this was fun. I'm going to be doing more live streams. I wanted to do a live stream today because it was 1 year ago that this model came to me. But actually, I'd like to do live streams on Wednesdays because it's the third day of the week. I often have stuff going on Saturdays. But this Wednesday, I'm busy. So I'm probably going to do my next live stream, not this Wednesday, but the following Wednesday. Alrighty. Thank you, everyone, for joining me. Please subscribe if you haven't subscribed already, and share this video. And until then, stay nested.